Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast. For a packed day of cycling, we have, I don't know what the name of this race is anymore, Gent Wevelgem. It's actually called In Flanders Fields from Middelkerke to Wevelgem.
Nah, we're not having this shit, Patrick. It is Gent Wevelgem.
Yeah, to me, it's Gent Wevelgem as well. It's 250 or 240 kilometers now. They've shortened it a little bit, but it features the traditional route. We start on the coast in the northwest of Belgium. Then we head through flat terrain, through De Moeren, which is a very exposed section where there's always wind. Then they begin a hill circuit after 130k. So after 3 hours, they do maybe the Barneberg, Monteberg, Kemmelberg combo from the normal side of the Kemmelberg. They're short, very steep climbs. And then there's flat terrain on roads where there's usually moves. Then there's the plug streets, which are sort of gravel, not full gravel, just basically shitty farm roads. Really, like, it's the sort of road where you can take your road bike on it, feel like you're a badass, but it's not that serious, you know? And then they do the same Monteberg, Kemmelberg. They go around, do a loop, and then come back and do the Barneberg, Kemmelberg, Oswear side, which is harder, steeper, really, really steep up to there. That's the last climb, though. It's 36 k's from the finish. And then they go through Ypres and into the finish in Wevelgem, which is tailwind today, good for the attackers. Not strong biblical winds today, though, Benji. Like, De Moeren was not going to be like 20 groups.
Exactly. The wind situation was not necessarily perfect there, but Sporza did improve their coverage because they had like a live stream for the actual Moeren segment on their website. But Patrick, I think the echelons noticed that a live stream was coming because in the Moeren, nervous peloton, they're all sprinting for the income into that the Moeren road that is so notorious for potential echelons, but nothing happens. Some teams try to push, but not enough wind, and then after the Moeren, the live stream shuts off because it's the Belgian news on that channel at that point. So then the echelons show up off broadcast.
The crazy thing was, like, that's what I was thinking. What if it had split? What if Van der Poel just goes solo in the Moeren? They just cut the broadcast?
I think they would actually.
I just saw a stream Afgelopen and I was like, no, not Afgelopen. Get back on. I need to watch what's going on. So I don't know what happened, but it was real splits and there were real riders on the back. There was Ineos' whole team missed it, Ganna behind. Visma had Laporte and Van Aert in front, but not Brennan, so their sprint option's not in front. Alpecin was sitting pretty. They had all their big hitters in front, including Seneschal supporting Van der Poel and Philipsen. And Manier was in front, I believe.
Correct.
Bini as well. So many sprinters were in front that actually no one really wanted to press home the advantage. It was actually coming back by the Scherpenberg, and that collection does happen just before the Monteberg, after the Barneberg. The second group gets back, but Monteberg always gets blocked. So it gets blocked in front. There's no time for that group to move up. We then hit the Kemmel. It's a pretty passive Kemmel. Actually, no big hitters attack, except Johnny Milan drops his chain or has some issue. Van Aert's right behind him. He has to put his foot down. That then causes a traffic jam. And then so all that group that had been in the echelons, they now missed another whole split because they didn't have time to move up.
Yep, that's very fair. But I think the two teams that were pushing that second echelon was part of Milan's team Trek and also the Decathlon for, I think, Lund Andresen, who missed that first echelon. But I think Lund Andresen might have been the one that was able to move up in this segment here. But there was one attack right on that Kemmelberg by Clock. Am I inventing that?
Oh, it was. You're right. Turner attacked and he actually kept it going. This is normally it's crazy how history repeats itself. So Matej Moric, I swear to God, attacked in exactly the same little S-bend in Gent Wevelgem 22. Exactly the same.
Correct.
Even on the same side of the road before the Plugstraat. Like, the riders they know the parkour, they know a good place to anticipate. Turner doesn't want to go alone. He wants a Florian Vermeersch who starts to move here, a Pollitt, a Matej Moric, a Vacek. He wants those guys to get across to him and try to anticipate the Plugstraat. That doesn't happen. Laporte's the only one from Visma. So Visma are looking pretty thin on the ground at this point. Van der Poel's also very passive here. And I guess you can always read the weather. You don't even need to read the weather forecast for these races. Just observe the behavior of Alpecin.
Patrick, before we get to the plug streets, I gotta shout, guards, there's someone in our chat section, Marco, who's saying that he loves the name of this race, the new name. I think he should be banned from our chat. Anyway, to the plug streets then. Nervous run-in.
We can't make Middelkerke happen. It's not a city.
The mayor of that city, he's got quite a story. He came to my birthday once. He gave me 50 euros for my... Was it my birthday or like my
so
communion shit?
Benji paid for... They always have too much money. If they're giving Benji 50 euros, they got too much money and now they're paying for the name of this race to be changed for their town. So
it's a very sad story. Anyway, plug streets. Talking about plug streets, nervous running towards it. Florian Vermeer is one of the riders that before the plug street is in bad position, but in the last stretch really moves up towards it. After which we get onto the plug street and the road kind of gets blocked for the first 500 meters. And the shot goes away from the peloton. We go back to the peloton, Patrick, and then all hell breaks loose is maybe an exaggeration, but people start attacking, whether it's Cedric Beulens, Johnny Vermeers. I'm pretty sure I saw Seneschal moving with Stuyven, then eventually pushing in
big attack.
A massive move. Laporte was responding to moves. Ben Turner was there as well. Paul Magnier actually made a move as well, maybe on the second or the first of the plug streets. But at the end of the day, I can just categorize all these attacks into the story of they put attrition into the group. They put trouble into the return of riders like Matthew Brennan, and they don't exactly create a situation where a group rides away. That's fair, right?
Yeah, and the big favorites like Van Aert and Van der Poel, they were just following at this point. There wasn't, last year, remember Pedersen dropped the bomber here and created the race-winning move on the plug streets when Philipsen had a mechanical. So I think a lot of the other favorites are looking to just get through here without a mechanical, but Magnier maybe pays for his enthusiasm. He has a mech as the plug streets are ending. Not good for him. He then changes bike with Bert van Leeuwenberger, whose bike I think was too big.
Yeah, I think it's a 3 centimeter difference between the two. And I don't think Paul Magnier was comfortable on that bicycle of Bert van Leeuwenberger. So he gets a bike change. And because of that, he has to come back in quite a serious gap. But Patrick, let's say you have a mechanical on your group ride and you're not with the group anymore. The only way you can get back is by training for it with joint cycling, right?
Exactly. Mechanicals and race incidents, they're often because of your legs. And it's true. It's because you're on the limit. It's because you're panicking. You're taking a poor line. Why doesn't Van der Poel ever have an issue? It's because he's training in a similar fashion to using joint cycling. And one thing I've noticed over the years is the riders who improve the most aren't necessarily doing anything crazy. That's actually, I listened to a couple of interviews from World Tour coaches recently, and all they're just going, why is Pedersen improving? Why is Van der Poel improving? Why is Pogačar improving? Is it some magic interval they're doing? The answer is probably, well, not probably, the answer will be year-on-year progression, consistency over and over and over again. And that's the hardest part. Not just the big rides, not doing a smash fest once every month and then putting the bike away. And that's where Join is really useful. You open the app, it tells you exactly what session to do. Every session will be it'll be achievable because it adjusts to your availability, how you're feeling, and your level. So you're able to actually achieve these workouts and not just achieve them, but they're not going to kill you every time either. So if you're stronger than expected, it progresses you. If you're tired or miss a session, it adapts. If you want to try the app, go to Join Cycling in the App Store on whatever device you have. Use the link in the episode description down below. It helps support the show. And now is a great time to build that consistency, which is something I need more than ever, given that it was minus 16 this morning. Yeah.
Anyway, minus 16 in your place, but it wasn't minus 16 for Paul Magnier, even though his heart might have been overflowing in that return. I'm pretty sure he gets back eventually, but it won't have gone too quickly, I would say. I think it was like 7 kilometers of work for him to get back, and maybe... Did Brennan get back at this point as well, or was he like in Narnia already?
After the plug streets, I think Doel brings him back, but by the second camel, the race really splits apart. It was still a big group by this point. It was like a full peloton had formed just about.
Break still ahead?
Break is still ahead. It's always good to be in the breakaway if you can be.
Yeah, that's true. Now, we get to that second Camelback, which is the Belvedere side, and we see Quickstep positioning Jasper Stuyven, Wout van Aert positioning himself on the left side of the road from his perspective. And the second we hit that climb, Wout van Aert is the one accelerating, Florian Vermeersch is on the wheel, Van der Poel is on the wheel, and we see that those three riders look to be the strongest on this Camelback. Well, Wout van Aert just keeps on pushing. Van der Poel gets into second position because Vermeersch starts to struggle towards the end of that segment, and it's Wout and Van der Poel that cross the top in first group, I would say. Vermeersch on a small gap, but he gets towards them over the top here. So it's a three-man group riding away from the peloton, and they end up joining the early breakaway, which was roughly 30 seconds ahead at the foot of that climb. So we've now got a group of, let's say, 3 plus maybe 6, 7 leftover riders from that breakaway, including a teammate for Vermeersch, Julius Johansson. So that's a very valuable rider. And also Frits Bisterbos, Luke's cousin, so we can't forget to mention that man either. So there's a bit of collaboration there with Johansson, plus the fact that on paper Vermeersch and Wout will continue riding, but will Mathieu van der Poel continue riding, knowing he's got Philipsen in the group behind Patrick?
I think Van der Poel will ride as long as it makes sure that he has the upper hand to win the race. So he's not going to not pull. He's not just... Because also you can't say Philipsen's a dead certainty to win the sprint either.
No.
Anything can happen in a sprint of 40 guys with Lund and Meus and Bini. And so not a dead certainty to win. But on the other hand, it's a good chance. So I think Van der Poel, they played it really smart, Alpecin. You make sure, and this is why you got to start from the end. If it comes back, you want to have the freshest lead out. You do that by having Van der Poel kill the other teams having to chase for the entire final. If it doesn't come back, you want to make sure that you're a little bit fresher than Van Aert and you can finesse him a bit. And he has to pull more because there's no Brennan. Brennan's gone. They're not going to bet on Laporte. And that's why Alpecin are in the perfect tactical situation with the best classic sprinter in the group behind. And Van der Poel, yeah, at least equal to Van Aert going into the final Camel.
Yeah, for sure. And now we move away a little bit from that front group because we go back to the group behind in the in-between segment before we get to the Ossuer Camelback. And there's two things I want to mention there. There's some crazy crash by Ben Turner. I still have not figured out how that crash happened. He just flips over his bike and his bike flips over him afterwards. He probably hurt his lower back a little bit. I don't know what the consequences are of the crash. Let's hope he's relatively okay, but I would have liked to see like a second angle from that crash because then we could potentially point out what could have happened, but looked like a crazy crash to me. Now, there was an anticipation.
Apparently he's all right, no fractures.
Oh, that's good news. That's very good news. There was an anticipation move before the Baneberg. You spoke about it earlier, Patrick. The Baneberg is sometimes a bit of a blocking moment in the peloton. Yeah. This is different because on paper, there's a group ahead at this point. So the peloton ain't going to block if they want to try and chase them down. And that wasn't necessarily going to happen. But Amy Dequin does make a move there before the Baneberg to try and like get ahead of things before we get to the actual, what do you call it? The last Camelberg. And then we get to that Ossuer Camelberg, which is basically led by Mathieu van der Poel accelerating. And to be honest, Wout looked strong at the start of that cobble sector, but towards the end, not so much.
He was getting put on a gap. Van der Poel just ground out this at a max possible. And Vermeersch, I don't know if it... Does it cost him pulling? Because he's...
what do you mean?
Well, like, he's got to look after himself a bit better before the last Camel. Like, he has to know those two are going to put him under pressure, and he keeps pulling full.
Yeah.
Like, just sit on.
Like...
But he also knows that, I don't know, I felt like if those three got over together, they were never being caught. And in fact, he gets dropped by a decent gap. It was like 7 seconds. It's
basically that Vermeer should have sat up a little bit before the Camelback to try and get over it with the other two, so that afterwards they can be all three together. But on the other end, I'm also thinking from the other perspectives here. If you're Mathieu van der Poel, you probably do want Vermeer there. Because at the end of the day, Van der Poel has benefited multiple times from a rider trying to attack, Wout van Aert closing it for Van der Poel. So not a terrible situation to be in for Van der Poel. Wout van Aert, I'm not sure I want Vermeers in that group.
I
from that initial
disagree.
perspective.
I think they both benefit hugely from him being there.
Okay.
Firstly, you get how much extra recovery do you get?
Quite a bit.
50% versus. You get 16.6%. No. Yes, you get 16.6. You get more recovery. I've got to do the math. You get quite a lot more recovery. 50%, maybe more. Okay.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean the end situation changes.
Yeah, but the end situation is Van der Poel's going to finesse you.
Yeah.
If there's peloton at 15 seconds with 1K to go, Van der Poel will stop pulling. And then it's going to be a dead stop sprint with Van Aert having to lead it out. That's what's going to happen.
But it's not Wout van Aert's choice that Vermeers doesn't come back at this point on the Camelberg itself.
Oh, on on the Kemmelberg, obviously they're going full. They're going to see what happens. I mean, afterwards, they pull full to keep Vermeers behind. It benefits neither. But yeah, it benefits neither of them, really. He's not going to beat either of them in a sprint, and he can help you get to the finish.
He's not going to... Yeah, but he's not going to beat either of you in the sprint, but he's going to attack, and then the question is, who of the two is going to respond? Then we both know Wout van Aert is going to be the one responding, because Van der Poel will finesse him.
I legit think they could have bullied him into just like pulling more or less to the finish.
I think it depends on the peloton as well, to be honest, this whole discussion.
Because there's going to be peloton pressure.
In hindsight, the peloton had a lot of pressure by the end of the race. We'll get to that. But at that time on the Camelberg, I'm not sure Wout was thinking about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they should have waited for Vermeers, just like not waiting for the Wolf. If Alps, then it maybe doesn't matter in the end. But I think I understand what you're saying in that Vermeers, maybe not, Rudolph network.
But
is it helping
if you don't
Van
get to the finish with the front group, then you don't win either. That's
the thing. There's not further hills to break it up. And we do see there are some splits, but I think Decathlon do a pretty good job of keeping their domestiques together around Lund over the final Kemmel, because what you don't want is resplitting. And maybe, if you have more groups across the road and then no one's really chasing and then you have representation fallacy, that doesn't happen. We quickly see there's a organized chase. It begins at 1 minute and it's two teams riding full decathlon. They got Bissiger, Darnhola, Bora riding full with Vermeers, Pithy, Van Dijk, because they got Meus. That's a lot of riders against Van Aert and Van der Poel. And I think Van der Poel at the end also said, and you could see in his how he looked, he's not riding like, he didn't look like he was at the end of E3. He looked a lot more relaxed than that.
I think so as well, but we get into this situation now where it's Mathieu van der Poel and Wout van Aert trying to keep Vermeers behind on about 15 to 20 seconds, I think, goes down a few times, goes up a few times. Then a peloton which was a minute behind at about 30 kilometers to go, but it gradually is coming down, and it's Decathlon and Bora collaborating, Bora for Meus, Decathlon for Lund Andresen, and we enter this final. And the way the race keeps going on paper, there's a bit of tailwind, so the attackers on paper have a little bit of an advantage, but that advantage can't necessarily counter 6-7 riders spacing behind you in the peloton. So the gap keeps coming down more and more and more, to the point where Vermeers eventually starts to lose time towards the front two riders as well, after quite a strong battle for the first half of those last 30 kilometers. But it's starting to look like Wout and Mathieu might not make it to the finish line, because on the Kemmelberg, the entire world was shouting, "Oh, Mathieu versus Wout, yes, the old days." With about 10 kilometers to go, it's not looking too glorious anymore.
The gap was coming down a lot, and it's funny. I mean, it's not a conspiracy, but if you watch, I don't want to ruin people's viewing experience, but if you begin to watch the race through the lens of where the motorbikes are, it will actually, it's really eye-opening. The gap comes down to 10 seconds because it then came down close, and I understand that means now domestiques are being more tied in the group behind, so it's then harder to close the final 10 seconds. The moto comes out, it then goes in front of the lead group. The gap immediately starts to tick up 1 second to 14 here and there to 14 seconds. And the chase is looking done. Vermeers is out. Darnhola's out. It's 3Ks to go. It's completely swinging back to Van der Poel and Van Aert. And then there's an attack, in fact, from the group behind. Ineos are chasing it. Jayco are chasing at one point, I think. And it's Alex Segart. And
Mate,
I was thinking, this is good news actually for Van der Poel and Van Aert.
the second the commentator said there's an attack from the peloton, I didn't even look at my screen, and I was like, that has to be Alex Segart. And it was. I saw the light blue shoulders that can be very confusing together with Decathlon, because Bahrain and Decathlon are very similar from the front angle. But Segart was blitzing across quite fast, actually. So he jumped away from that peloton, got closer and closer to the front. Like, we're not talking about like 20 seconds between the front of the race and the peloton at this point. It's a smaller gap, so the bridging is possible. And Segart does bridge. And understandably, the second that he bridges, he takes some time to recover, but afterwards, he does a very limited amount of pulls. Maybe 2 or something in the final, maybe 3 at best. But the majority of the work is Wout and Mathieu. And is it weird to say that I felt like Alex Segart's presence actually deteriorated the cooperation between Wout and Mathieu as well?
It was like no one was committing.
Yeah.
Van der Poel wasn't committing full because he wanted to make sure if it goes to the line, he wins. Van Aert was refusing to get finessed. And Segart wasn't pulling. Yeah, and I know he has to recover after the bridge, but then I was like, why did you bridge to this group to then just get caught? Like, if you pull, you guarantee top 3, and Bahrain have no sprinter.
Like, I was expecting him to attack, and I'm fine with someone sitting on to then attack later, but his attack then also came at a point where they were basically already caught. So there's no value in that either. So yeah, they get caught, and we enter the last 1.5, 2 kilometers, and at this point, which teams still have a lead out? Red Bull for Meus, but did we see Seneschal maybe still for Philipsen?
No,
but
not Red Bull for Meus.
Who had lead outs left?
Decathlon. They had Case Bol for Lund. We had Trentin and Mozzarella positioning themselves. Van der Poel begins the lead out. So actually, say when Segart attacks, Van der Poel keeps the pace high. Ineos then close it. They used Ganna to bring it all back so Watson could go for the sprint. And then Case Bol begins his lead out. It's good he's there, but Lund could have won today.
Yep.
Lund really could have won today. If Bol So Bol starts his lead out middle, moves legally to the left, but doesn't go all the way. Alpecin were fucked. Like, for sure, Philipsen at 700, he's like, I'm boxed. He had Seneschal and Haynes. He even said in the interview afterwards, he's like, yeah, they don't really know what they're doing. They're learning on the job for me here. And they didn't know the right moments to go. Bol starts to move across, and I was like, that's it for Philipsen. He's about to get boxed. He then leaves the door open. Philipsen slides up, boom, and moves into Lund. Then Bol finishes his lead out and doesn't move, and then reopens the door for Philipsen to sprint through on the left side.
I actually think the mistake is earlier. I think the mistake is that Decathlon allowed Samuel Watson to go in second position behind Bol in front of Philipsen, which led Bol to not necessarily know which side Lund would pass on, left or right.
He didn't know.
And I think that led to the moment of Bol not closing the line in the first place. Because hypothetically, if Lund is in the wheel of Bol and Bol is doing that lead out on the left side of the road, then he will open up the gap for Lund to sprint barrier side, which is perfect, because then Philipsen has to go all the way around on the right Bol, and that's the ideal sprint lead out then from Bol situation for Lund Andresen, and in that situation, Lund probably wins. Yeah. But I think the mistake is allowing Watson to come in between in the first place.
Then yeah, he opens really early, he then stretches it, that creates space, and Philipsen ducks up the inside, sees the opening he probably didn't think would be there, and he wins this race quite easily ahead of Lund. Yeah. Laporte bike throws De Lee for third. Good to see De Lee up there though, and he nearly came third. Robert Donaldson, big result, fifth for Jayco. That's a crazy good result for him. And Trentin and Mozzato, 6th and 7th. Like in Kona, they were 2nd and 3rd. So Trentin has been in the top 10 of Kona, Sanremo, E3, and Flanders. Thank you very much. De Gent 8th, Abrahamsen 9th, Sturven 10th. Benny didn't, he wasn't competitive in the sprint. I don't know what happened. He comes 21st.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't really notice Binny too much in the sprint either, but that explains because he didn't sprint at the front apparently. Nonetheless, I would say that Alpecin had the race under control in the grand scheme of things, which is Van der Poel in the attack, and Philipsen has sprinting option. But that doesn't necessarily just mean they had the whole race under control either, because Van der Poel and Philipsen had to do a lot of stuff alone. Philipsen, especially in the sprint as well, towards the final section, which massive credit to Seneschal for being a valuable rider in this race as well for them. Gaines, like you said, it's like Gaines is basically a bit of an Uruk-hai, you know? Like, he's not the most well-known rider in the world. He's relatively new within the team. He shows up and he's performing. I wouldn't say he's as Uruk-hai as maybe some of the Paris-Roubaix performances we've seen from Alpecin, Thomas Six in the last couple of years, but strong performance by the team and a deserved victory by Jasper Philipsen. I think there's a world in which that group does make it to the finish line, but then, like you say, they might need Vermeers to do so. There's a world in which Lund Andresen wins this race. The one most disappointing performance for me is Brennan, because I did expect him to compete and be part of this group for the sprint.
Exactly, and that's why Alpecin had the big upper hand, because, Laporte is not going to beat Philipsen in a sprint. He can follow in the wheels for a result, but Alpecin always had that upper hand where they're like, well, Van Aert, if you want to make it to go to the finish, you're going to have to make it really go to the finish, and then Van der Poel's going to be in the wheel. And the absence of Brennan, I mean, he missed the crosswinds, and then that meant he was behind after the first camel, and then the race just spirals from there. And when you look at the group of riders that make the finish, like, you would expect him to be there. All due respect to Gashinyard and other riders. So I think a good race. Tactically interesting. I liked how it could come back. You know, it was really within the balance.
Yeah. Honestly, I would have loved to see an informed Tim Merlier here. But I want to mention the other sprinter, actually. Jonathan Milan, who, after the last Kelmerberg, was actually in the peloton that was supposed to sprint for the finish line. And he had a mechanical and needed a bike change. And after that bike change, the camera motorbike was filming him. And at that exact moment, the little track car moves to the left, in my opinion, quite dangerously close to the motorbike. And the DS comes through the window. I think it was Paolo Sangelli. And he shouted, "Fuck off" to the motorbike. I know why he shouted "fuck off." Because he wanted to hand a sticky beat on to Jonathan Milan, is my interpretation of that. So, I'm sorry, but that was completely disrespectful by that DS. I hope he gets penalized for it. This is not a good example in a cycling race, especially because the reason the DS was shouting at the motorbike, who's just doing his job, by the way, is because he wanted to cheat to get Jonathan Milan back to the peloton.
Yeah, but we're seeing it's sort of not an accepted practice, but it looks terrible. There was the Zangler one in E3 on Friday. It just looks so bad. It looks
so bad, but we know that sticky beat-ons are a thing in the sport of cycling, especially when you're dropped. We know that there's riders that will benefit from being at the back of a car.
I know when you're dropped.
Try and come back.
I think it's more when there's been a mech.
But in this situation, the disrespect from that DS to the camera motorbike, who's just doing his job, that's what frustrates me the most.
Yeah, it's like
I judge people based on how they act towards a waiter. That's how I feel about this.
Isn't the issue that basically therefore these sticky bidons must occur all the time and that they only get penalized when they're on camera?
That is a reality. That's true.
So then if you had, I know the UCI wants to have like power data biopassports or power data passports, but you could actually see, like, for example, the famous Demarche presser. It's like, if your cadence is 0 and you're going 40 kilometers an hour uphill, probably not. Probably holding onto the car. So you can see it, but it's happened now in back-to-back classics. Zangler got DSQ'd Ridley for it, and I don't know what happened. Milan didn't make it back anyway. He finished on 5 minutes. Same with Manier. Don't know what happened to Manier. I guess the mech. It's sort of a race where you just gotta avoid bad shit happening to you. Like, Philipsen didn't really do anything special in this race. He made the echelon. He was in position for the camels. He followed.
Being good enough and having a good sprint.
Just being good, not being on the wrong side of things, and having a lead out.
Last year, Philipsen was the guy that did have bad luck in the Plug Streets, right?
Yeah, he was on the wheel of Pedersen and flatted. Yep. So I think a pretty good addition. And motorbikes. We'll see. Okay, any other people jump out?
I think that's it. I think you mentioned Donaldson. I think Emmy de Gent being in the attack and then finishing 8th is also once again a strong performance. But I think we should indeed get into women's Gent Wevelgem, Patrick. And the parcours for this one is simpler, so to say, because they've only got 2 Camelbergs. And it's, first of all, the Plug Streets, just about halfway the race, so 135 kilometers in total. Then after about 60k, we have the 3 Plug Streets, after which we do Monteberg-Camelberg from the Belvedere side, then Scherpenberg-Baneberg, then the Camelberg from the Ossuaire side. So the way I see it, it's basically the last 66% of the hill zone that is used in the men's race. And then, of course, the 30 kilometers from the top of the Camelberg to the finish line as well. But startlets-wise, the favorite was Lorena Wiebes, but in her team, no Kopecky. So it was a team where Wiebes either had to do a lot of work herself or the team would have to control what's happening in the race as well. But what did you expect from the competition? Like a Balsamo with Little Trek, for example, Cole with Phoenix. A lot of teams that do have a bit of a sprinting option where we've seen more than we should see, that they opt for their sprinter in situations where they could perhaps only get second behind Wiebes and go all in for that situation. Did we expect different today?
I didn't expect to see what happened happen, and that's because Lorena Wiebes just took matters into her own hands. I think this is a function of her team being a little bit weaker than previous years. Yeah. So there's no Kopecky here, and Mardelak is here, but she's not been in the same shape. She's been in okay shape, but not as prominent as maybe I expected, like she was in 24. So Wiebes just takes the race by the scruff of the neck. She attacks. Well, she was already following Shabby, who was attacking on the Baneberg. The Baneberg is actually a puncher paved climb, so it suits Shabby really, really well. That already creates a pretty small selection. We've got 2 Jaycos with a sprinter, Paternoster. UAE have 4. Gasparini, Persico, Swinkles, Yastrab. No Lara Gillespie, but they got 4. That's pretty good. Last time I checked, in a group of 12.
Yep.
Also, there's Mealy Cousins and maybe Perkins, another Phoenix. So there's also 2 from Trek, Balsamo and Moores. We get to the last camel. We get to the camel with that group who's anticipated. It was pretty blocked behind because UAE had been really pushing the front group. They took it upon themselves to pace. Wiebes is just sitting in. She goes full gas on the last camel. So she decides, okay, I'm going to make the group smaller, and that's more manageable for me than if there's 4 UAE, 2 Treks, 2 Phoenix, 2 Jayco in a group of 12. I'm going to make it a smaller group.
If it's a 12-rider group getting over this last Camelberg, then the reality is then Wiebes is going to have to control attacks left and right in this group. So I was indeed looking at a situation where getting over the top with 5 is much better, and that's what happens. But Wiebes was gapping almost everybody on this. Like, genuinely, I think Shabby might have been the only one that was really able to hold on just over the top, and it came together with a group of 5, which was Wiebes. Fleur Moore is a fantastic ride, by the way, for Little Trek here at this point. Shabby there for FDJ Suez, and the 2 riders from UAE being Gasparini and Swinkle. So just like MSR, 2 riders in a group of 4 or 5. So in this situation, 5. And the group behind did have teammates. So Balsamo was there, but didn't have a teammate. She had Fleur Moors in the group ahead. Cole had Cousins still. Shadi Bossard was solo. Paternoster had Mackenzie Kaplan, the Australian champion. Danink Hengeveld was there for Visma. And I think Persico might have still been there as well, or was stuck in between at a certain point.
Persico got back to that group, I think.
But that group kept losing time, Patrick. And I'm saying 20 seconds became 25, became 30, became 40 seconds. Despite, well, we'll get to that. In group 2, Cousins and Copeland are properly pacing behind group 1.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about the cooperation in the front group where Wiebes is present?
I mean, why would Fleur Moors pull full with Lorena Wiebes with Balsamo initially 10 seconds behind in a group? and the peloton's at like 1 minute. The peloton is gone. So you can let Balsamo come back in, have a teammate, and you have 2 fast options.
Well,
why would UAE pull when they have Persico there and they can have 3 and 8?
So I've got 2 takes on this. My take is the following. With Fleur my counter would be that if Moore sits up and Balsamo returns with another 8 riders to a group of 13, for example, then we're in a situation where it's probably just going to be a sprint between Balsamo and Wiebes, which Trek is going to lose. I don't know if they've got a bigger chance of winning than with attacks from a 1 out of 5 group.
I don't know about that. Because you still have to then relay to keep the peloton behind, and so people are going to work. Then you have Persico, you got more people to attack. Aren't you more likely to have a smaller group going away? And then you can plonk Balsamo in the wheel of Wiebes?
It depends on how the other teams then see it, because then if Cousins or Kaplan keep pacing for Paternoster and Goal Sprint, for example, collaborating with Wiebes, then you'd need... We've seen that the reality is that these teams usually don't end up working together against Wiebes, which they should do. So I agree with you that Meurs relayed too much. Fleur Moors relayed too much. I'm not sure I would have said sit up completely either, because I don't trust Balsamo at all, and that's why I don't necessarily trust that situation either. Shabby was pacing quite a bit as well. Gasparini and Swinkles were also relatively pulling with Wiebes as a whole, so...
And no Wollaston here. So FDJ, despite what you read in the result sheet, FDJ probably don't think they're big favourites to win the sprint behind. There's no Wollaston pulled out. So, and there's no Jerry. But yeah, it's even in that group too, like Hangevel's not pulling for Visma. That group is about to get caught, and she attacks and just sits in the middle in front of the peloton. And then Visma have 5 in the peloton. They don't help Canyon chase, and the gap comes down a lot. So a lot of teams just, I don't know. I didn't really like this post Camel phase. I got to admit, because the gap's really big. I'm like, you have to start attacking Wiebes now. The more likely you are to win is the further out from the finish you attack. Because the closer to the finish, she'll just use you as a lead out and she'll make it a sprint. And then you're probably going to get more hurt by repeated sprints than Lorena Wiebes, would be my guess.
That's for sure. And we start entering the last 8 kilometers, last 7 kilometers, and I'm like, okay, these riders are still relaying. We don't see any attacks yet. And I see 2 riders from UAE in this front group. So the logical scenario in my head is UAE starts to roll attacks with both their riders to try and get away and hope that Meurs and Shabby then look at Wiebes to close it. That is the situation you want to create in this. And then maybe Shabby and Meurs try and attack at some point as well. That's what the ideal scenario to beat Wiebes would be in the final 5 kilometers, final 10 kilometers, to be honest. Because like you say, the longer you wait, the less your chances to beat Wiebes, because the longer you wait, the less bursts Wiebes will have to do to catch every attack. And I swear it takes up until maybe 3.5 kilometers to go for the actual move to come from, I think, Gasparini from the back of the group on the left side of the road. And the gap was made pretty quickly because Wiebes was boxed in. And I gotta give credit to Shabby here, because Shabby's at the front at this point, does not respond. Mortis is in the wheel of Shabby, and Shabby actually moves right in a situation where Wiebes kind of gets boxed in to the point where she has to come around. And by the time she comes around, the gap's pretty solid, right?
It was a decent gap. It's not one she could sprint and use that quality to get straight into the wheel on, which we saw on the second attack of Gasparini. And so great timing from Gasparini. I think Wiebes thought she gambled that Shabby was going to close it for her initially, and Shabby actually didn't. So it was looking good. We thought, okay, this is great. Maybe they waited a little bit long, but UAE have got 2. Unfortunately, so Gasparini's closed by Wiebes. It was a long close, and she was immediately worried that she was going to get attacked. And Swinkles starts to look strange. She's not looking ahead. She's now fixating on Shabby, as if she's worried Shabby's going to attack. We learn after the race that UAE agreed that only Gasparini would attack and Swinkles would sprint for 3rd.
I'm sorry, but that's exactly what happened in MSR as well. In MSR, you can somewhat understand that they're trying to get a podium in a monument, but we're talking about Wevelgem here, which is still a very valuable race. But if you always do something halfway, then you're not risking it all to try and win the race. You're basically mostly riding for second place at that point. And the ideal situation is rolling attacks with both riders. Because Gasparini alone will not make Wibbes tiredly enough for Swingles to beat Wibbes. There is no world in which that is the case. So this is a losing strategy from the get-go. Both of them should be attacking. Shabby should be attacking as well. To be honest, Moore's sprint at the end was super powerful, but she should also, from a logical standpoint, be attacking as well. And we only see 2 attacks, both for Gasparini, and that's it.
Yeah, it was kind of like, okay, that was that was that then. Because the second one, Wiebes isn't blocked, she snaps on the wheel.
Yeah.
She then keeps the pace high into the final K, and then she just wins the sprint. Well, it was going to be easily, but then she decides to nearly Amstel Gold Race herself and celebrates early, but still wins by about a wheel length ahead of Fleur Moors. And so, yeah, it's a big result for Moors. Second, that's the biggest result of her career. She's only 20 years old on Little Trek.
Crazy.
And Swinkles, she's had a good season so far, 1,300 UCI points. But indeed, Benji,
Congrats on podiuming every race. And Trofeo Alfredo Binda was a great race to win. But I have a hard time accepting a losing strategy like that from a team perspective.
You should probably give it a crack.
They got 3rd and 5th in a group of 5. Congrats.
Guazzini wins the sprint from the peloton, which is a little bit surprising. I think she's been good as a lead out here before. So FDJ actually did have the fastest rider in the group behind. But
I do think Shabby was cooked.
Yeah,
she started sprinting backwards.
Yeah, don't pull then.
I agree.
Sit on. Cole 7th, Paternoster 8th, Marcus 9th, Gillespie 10th. So UAE also 3 in the top 10, Benji. So suck it.
Wow. I'm so happy for them.
You have to admit, though, UAE this year, they're the strongest team in cycling. It's not close. Or is it FDJ? Am I wrong?
Wow. I think UAE has been the most impressive from a numerical advantage perspective.
Yeah.
They're always with multiple riders in groups, but the way they play them out is not a win-optimized strategy. It's a get as close as possible in the results strategy, accepting losing, which I don't like that if you're with 2 riders in a group of 5 or with 3 riders in a group of 8, then I want to see you try to win the race.
I think they've been given the UCI point directive, Benji.
I don't care.
I think it's flowed through to the women's team. They have nearly 70% more points than second place SD Works. Damn.
That's fine. It's not going to change their life. Gent Wevelgem victory might.
What do you think about the idea that UCI points should only count for your first place rider in a race?
Wait, who brought this up? Did you just think of this, or is this an actual thing?
Told me.
Oh. Well then. Oh. I don't know about that, to be honest. That feels like it's against the idea of a team sport.
No, because with UCI points, the riders, this is how it works, right? And I know there's old heads saying this, that riders don't care about winning anymore. It's legit true. It is true because contracts now, since relegation became so important, you get paid for points. If you rack up 1,500 UCI points, you will get most likely a 7-figure contract. And you don't have to win a race.
I'm happy for the riders that they have more money, but at the end of the day, I still think Gent Wevelgem victory would have been better than scoring 110 UCI points in Carlijn Swinkels' career.
Yeah, but true. I don't know. I'm more talking about like.
I understand, like in general, like in the big picture.
Yeah. I'm more thinking men's cycling.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot more wrong than just the way UCI points are distributed. It's also which races distribute UCI points for World Tour teams to be relegated, for example, or pro teams to be going up. Because, like, whenever you bring up the idea of like, okay, hypothetically, let's say World Tour teams only score World Tour points, and based on their World Tour points, the bottom 2 just get a blanket relegation, regardless of what pro teams have in comparison to them. Then people come up with the idea of like, why do the pro teams deserve to go up if they have in the old system, less UCI points than the World Tour teams.
Because they're probably better than the 2 worst world teams.
And on top of that, the pro teams don't have... It depends on which pro team you are, but the pro teams don't necessarily have the same amount of racing schedule, etc. The budget to do the same stuff. Like, it's not a fair game anyway, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but like, look at Unibet, look at Tudor, look at Q365. They would make, I mean, it doesn't matter, but because half of them, well, most of them are in the Tour de France anyway from automatic wildcard, but they're amongst the best 18 teams, I think.
And I never understood the idea of the 3-year cycle, because the defense for the 3-year cycle is we'll make it 3 years for the sake of giving more security to teams to have a longer World Tour license, for example. But isn't there more security in knowing that if you're relegated, you can get back in a year if you step up your game again?
Yeah. Well,
otherwise, you're too shit anyway.
I guess it's if you have a big rider who gets injured 1 year. It helps you develop riders. Otherwise, you'll just sign like MISC 30-year-old Conti sprinters, Classic C sprinters every year on 1-year contracts, rather than trying to develop a Oscar Only, which might take time.
Wow. Depends on which Oscar Only you're talking about. Anyway, talking about...
He saved Picnic's license last year.
Yeah, I'm very happy for them, but right now he's not looking like he will top 3 the Tour de France.
No, I don't think so.
That said, I do hope we see the best of Oscar Only again at the Tour de France, to be clear.
Yeah. But I guess it's... You see how, Unibet are doing very well. Anyway, they won La Route Torrangelle today. They keep winning. They won with Vontarini, who hadn't won in 8 years. He hadn't won in 8 years. No, I'm not doing
I hadn't even seen it yet, buddy.
That's my recap of that race on YouTube, so whatever.
Catalunya. We got to talk about it.
Yep.
Red Bull. Well, I got to go into the actual stage. It's basically 7 times the Montjuic Climb in Barcelona, which we have every year. It's a very short stage, 95 kilometers. Remco was the favorite for the stage, hypothetically beforehand, in our heads, because he's got a bit of a kick at the finish line, and the parkour is on paper hard enough to, if you do it well, drop the more versatile sprint as well. We'll see about that, because Red Bull did make it hard from the get-go, and I swear the first attack by Remco came with about 36 kilometers to go on the 5,000 Montjuic climb, and immediately the response was Vingegaard on the wheel, Only on the wheel, Lenny Martin is on the wheel, Pare Pancho on the wheel. Lipovic was behind. How much did the co-leadership of Lipovic hinder Remco's plans of potentially winning the stage in this specific day?
0. Absolutely 0. The problem is, Vingegaard cannot let, especially when he's isolated, and he's going to be isolated. If Remco goes full on Montjuic, the only person that might be there is Jorgensen, and he's not here. It's when you look back at the Tour de France, sorry, Oscar Only, it's like the best punchers following Remco.
Yeah.
Vingegaard's not going to let Remco go 40 kilometers from the finish when he's isolated. When Remco, what's he on GC?
1 minute 30?
Okay, yeah, it's a lot, but if you're there, it's just easier to close it than say,
and
okay,
it's Remco.
Against Remco on this circuit, rather than say, okay, I'll just wait for Bart Lemon to chase.
Yeah.
So I actually think the bigger problem is Remco was, first of all, Bora made it too hard too early.
Yeah.
And then Vingegaard, and then Remco was too close in GC.
I think that's fair, but...
Because he waited for Lipovic to roll the 1-2s, but then Lenny's closing Lipovic, etc.
Like, a lot happened in these next few laps, Patrick. Like, an attack from Lipovic on the 4th last long Montjuic, response by Vingegaard, a counter by Vingegaard, Lipovic and all the others in the wheel, Remco attacks again with 28 kilometers to go, everybody in the wheel, Skelmo's counters in the downhill, everybody in the wheel. There was a mythical battle between Ciccone and Soler, by the way.
That was so good.
For KOM points. I think Ciccone won it in the end.
Rolled him, yeah.
Hilarious, that fight. So that is like an entire side story to this entire stage, but...
There's another epic battle today. Oscar Only, whatever the fuck he was doing, and Doran Godon winning the final sprint.
Because Only started making moves as well, while Godon was desperately trying to survive at the back of that group. Fully agree. Now, I think the perfect example is with 19k to go on the third last lap, where Only went together with maybe a Charming or something from UNOX. Everybody following. Remco was kind of at the back of the group here, so maybe over pushed himself a little bit in the earlier laps, or was recovering in this lap to hope to go again in the future. Whatever. Ciccone then secures the KOM points on the second last Munch weekend. To be honest, we can all combine this into last Munch week incoming, Patrick. On that climb, we've seen an attack by Enric Mas. To be clear, Godon is still in the group at this point.
Yep.
So is Brady Gilmore. Yep. So two potential versatile sprinters, but...
Seb Berwick. He was there, closing Enric Mas.
Famous versatile sprinter.
He was.
Remco counters in the downhill, and he looks behind, has a gap on Mas, looks behind, looks frustrated, stops attacking, waves his hand in the air, and waits for the group. Is it a hot take that I think Remco could have ridden away there and won the stage?
It's not a hot take. Mas was like 1 second away from giving up.
I think Remco just bottled the stage there.
First of all, Mas is nowhere near him on GC, right? Movistar have no sprinter. Mas is not going to... He wasn't going to close the gap. And this is why if Remco attacked and saved his bickies for the last lap or two, then it's more likely Vingegaard's going to say, okay, he's not going to take a minute 30 on me here.
Yeah. But Vingegaard would still probably follow and try to go for the stage. I don't believe that he would have just said, just go there. You can have the stage, Remco.
Yeah, probably. But it looked like all the big guns spent all their bullets on lap 4 and 5, and they were cooked by the final lap because it was, just Enric attacking on that climb.
Now, over the top, after Remco gave up his winning attack, Red Bull starts doing lead out with maybe 2 riders, including Lipovic. For Remco Evenepoel, the godlike lead out, Lipovic and Hindley, the pinnacle of acceleration. That said, who's coming up on the left side of the road, Patrick? It's Dean Gordon. Wow.
Gordon. He's got beaten by Pogacar here in a sprint before, but he moves up. He comes at the right time, but unfortunately for him, he brings Brady Gilmore. Like, he really drags him into this sprint, launches him at high speed, and Gilmore looks a little bit more aero. He's a lot more compact than Godon, and he
it's Gordon.
Brady Gilmore rolls him in the sprint. Big upset. Well, actually, I thought he was going to win a stage this week, just not this one. Beats Godon, Evenepoel third, David Gonzalez fourth. Antoine Lote, he followed the guys. First of all, he was top 10 first stage. He also followed them on when the GC guys went on lap 5. Very strong performance from him, the 20-year-old on decathlon. Senna Romain also followed. He was good. The Neo Pro on Alpecin. Vergalito 7th, Gualdi 8th, Lenny 9th, Henok Mullerbrand 10th. GC. Vingegaard wins 122 ahead of Martinez, 130 ahead of Lipovic, 143 ahead of VPP, 213 ahead of Remco. Actually, Remco, that's a bigger gap than I thought. Maybe Vingegaard could let him go. Gold 317, Skelmo's a 411, Kian 520, Riccatello 525, Carapaz 536.
I'm not surprised about the Gilmore victory in terms of surviving this parcours for one reason, Patrick. Cadel Evans Great Ocean Road Race. That race is the most promising race in terms of palmarès in the world.
But it's the same parcours.
Gilmore got third there. He survived. And to be honest, when I looked at the list yesterday, I thought I said to my wife, Gilmore is a pick for this stage. I probably had more confidence in Godon and Gilmore if I had to be honest. But I still think Remco had the biggest chance of all. He blew it on the final descent. I'm still saying it. He would have won this stage if he kept the attack going. But it's a fantastic win for Gilmore. First World Tour victory. I remember him the first time maybe in, I think 2024 somewhere was the first time he popped up on the rank. And then maybe Tour de Rwanda last year is when he really pushed to the forefront. This is the moment where like you go from winning Volta Portugal stages to now you're a versatile sprinter that everybody will think about you in Romani stage, in Catalunya stage, in Tour Down Under stages. Maybe in a Vuelta as well in a stage, but Giro Tour not necessarily feeling that yet, but he's 24, step forward. Looking forward to what he does in the future, but definitely a super talented rider. But do we learn anything off today specifically? Because I feel like we've asked the question already, whether we learned anything from Remco and Vingegaard and so forth. Are we more confident in Remco for Tour de France after seeing this Catalonia after what was, to be honest, a failure in UAE?
Remco said that he missed the last percentages from the crash, and so his final GC doesn't reflect his level here.
I think that's fair, but I'm also not confident that that level would have been enough to be remotely be competitive for the actual victory.
Yeah, a lot of riders this week is a lot of if, to quote the famous Rafa Nadal conference about Kyrgios, if. Like,
if my aunt had wheels, she'd be a truck.
If I had just followed him, I would have a better GC position. If I hadn't got dropped on the descent, I'd have a better GC position. If I hadn't got in the cross, like, okay, but that's running general classification is testing all your skills. So,
Almeida, I can somewhat understand.
Almeida something is up. That's to me. That's just not his level at all.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe there's illness next to the fact that he crashed or something. But
he said it's nothing to do with the crash. He said he's sick or something.
Oh, let's hope he then resolves that before the Giro, because that's a month and a half away.
Yeah. So yeah, Vingegaard wins Catalunya, but I would say he was pretty isolated for the last hour of this stage. And so he had to do a lot himself, and that has to be better in the Giro. Otherwise,
of course,
yeah, he will come under attack.
Well, controversially, I don't even think it matters right now in terms of, yes, he needs a better team for the Giro, but the gap between Vingegaard and his competition for the Giro was so significant that he should walk it either way.
I think especially the way we just made the discussion about UCI points. GC is the same in Grand Tours. If you make a big statement early in the race, the reality is the other teams will do the work for you if you're isolated.
I don't actually think that's hardcore related to UCI points, because people did that before UCI points.
That's always been the case for Grand Tours.
Even in 1 week races, that was the case before UCI points. Like, it doesn't shock me that Red Bull went for the podium with Lipovic yesterday instead of trying to roll attacks on Vingegaard. We've seen that in cycling 10 years ago.
Remco said that he didn't feel very good yesterday. That's why he switched from the plan, which was to attack on the second last climb.
Well, I think that's a fair argument to not attack on the second last climb, but I still think maybe a balance between what he did to leave Gal behind and then roll attacks later towards the bottom of the climb, of the last climb, then maybe that's a combination you can do, but I don't know. In the end, the outcome is there with two riders on the top five, one in the podium, which before the race started, I would have expected Lipovic second or third, probably second at this race.
Yeah. So Catalunya was all right.
Martinez is just super impressive at this point. Like, Bahrain definitely paid a lot for Lenny Martinez, and I don't think his performance is still out, oh, that was definitely worth it. But maybe in the long term, it can be. What, sorry?
I think Martinez is outperforming his contract with Bahrain.
Really? How much was it again?
$2 million a year.
Second at Catalunya, fifth at Paris.
Benji, they never win.
Yeah, but
he won 3 World Tour races for them last year in big races. He has
for $2 million a year. I want you to win a Grand Tour stage at least, which he can.
He's in a hilly 1 day race. He's always top 5. Paris 5th, Catalunya 2nd. Like
we're talking about $2 million though, eh?
Yeah, that's chump change these days. 4th in Flesh.
Like, if we compare it towards a contract of Ayuso, for example, and yeah, sure, it's definitely worth it. But
yeah, exactly. That's the market. Oscar Onley, your favorite.
Yeah, my favorite. I was getting roasted in the comment section on YouTube and Spotify 2 months ago.
On Spotify.
We're saying he would not win a Tour de France. He would not win the Tour de France. That's not even a hot take.
Why would you say that?
It was colder than ice, and I got roasted. And now he can't podium Catalunya, which I'm actually quite sad about. I want to see a better Only, but that's beside the point.
He rode like he could podium. I think, I don't know. I think the most impressive this week is Valentin Paripantra. He had 0 support. Yeah. He is like 50 kilos, and he never missed a split. Crosswinds he probably did, but then he got bailed out. So Yeah, good job, Valentin Paripantra. Top 4. Take it.
Do we expect him to make like a switch to... Because like at Paris, 12th, here we got 4th in GC. Dauphiné as well could potentially go for GC, could try go for a stage. Yeah. In a Grand Tour, Paripantra can lock down 2 stage wins. Would you prefer 2 stage wins or top 10 in GC?
I reckon they'll give it a go. Top 10 in GC this year at the Tour
Why
de
not
France.
both?
Why not both? Yeah, exactly.
Then again, the later you get in the race, the harder it is to win a breakaway stage, because then more people are out of GC to try and win breakaway stages.
Anyone else stand out at you as a surprise this week, Benji? Like Godon's not a surprise. Yeah, any other young riders or narratives?
Ooh.
I think one narrative, there doesn't seem to be any beef between Lipovitz and Remco. Like, I think Lipovitz was almost in tears thanking Remco yesterday.
I also didn't really expect there to be beef between the two.
I know, actually, but just like they clearly were okay to work for each other.
Well, yes, Lipovitz also let out Remco for the sprint here at the end of the stage, although that's with less risk than what Remco did yesterday. The question is, are they willing to do it when it's about the Tour de France? And I think at the Tour de France, they will only do it if one of them is properly out of GC. Which is somewhat understandable, because if they're both on 2 and 3 minutes, for example, then why should you use one to offer up for the other?
Yeah. Maybe they'll just like attack whoever's ahead of them.
That said, right now, Lipovitz looks the better climber on climbs of 45 minutes, I would say. Yeah. But Remco is obviously the better overall rider in terms of like overall. Not necessarily, I'm not talking like GC overall.
Yeah, it's tricky. Lipovitz, I think, is more... for a podium, you'd be more likely to rely on Lipovitz to then actually win.
Yeah.
It's still Remco, his level of talent, if you can get it right.
Yeah, but that's a weird, like, people might hear that and might think that's weird. For example, your statement is basically, Remco has a better chance of winning the race, but Lipovitz has a better chance of podiuming the Tour de France every year.
Lipovitz is like a purist GC rider. He just does his best, like, result every day.
And your take is that Remco's ceiling is higher, but he never reaches his ceiling, or at least once every few years at a Grand Tour.
Remco has a way better TT. Remco is better on the flat. Remco has better punch. Remco is better in the crosswinds, and he has better one-off climbing performances in 2024 Tour de France. So if you can put them all together, he is the better GC rider.
If we compare the 2024 Tour de France to the 2025 Tour de France, how comparable are they? Because I felt like the 2025 Tour de France felt more fatiguous throughout the entire race. No clue if fatigue is a word, but so I find it hard to like compare the two and say, okay, Remco's 2024 TDF was on paper higher watt per kilo, but is that in reality better than the performance we saw in 2025?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know. All races are different. That's also the limitation sometimes in just comparing the watts per kilo. Like, all races are different. Different weather, etc. Okay, that was a big week of racing. Tomorrow, we might have the weekly show on Tuesday rather than tomorrow. We have Dwaalsdorf Vlaanderen on Wednesday. We have the cheese race, Paris Camembert, on Tuesday. So stay tuned for the weekly show on Tuesday. Other than that, Alt Copy, Mara Schmidt wins. It was a head-to-head sprint against Laurence. I have no idea how he won it, to be honest, because I need to go and watch it. Because, yeah, Laurence shouldn't have been pulling, so I need to go watch that. I'll watch the YouTube stream. You got anything else to say, Benji, for yourself?
Not really. I jumped off the bike to do the podcast, and I'll jump back on the bike after this.
Robert walk-off home run last night. Stayed up.
Who?
Exactly.
Robert?
Yep. Great homer.
Homer, the guy from The Simpsons?
Yep. Thanks for listening as always. Go Nolan McLean. See you then. Ciao, ciao.